Years ago, my dad was having this problem. He was really dizzy all the time. He'd be at work and all of a sudden he'd get this bout of dizziness and he'd have to hold himself up with his hand or take a seat down for a little while. So he went to the doctors to find out what was going on. The doctor diagnosed him with vertigo and sent him home with a bunch of treatments for vertigo. He took the treatments, but it was still happening. He was still getting dizzy. So he went back to the doctors and the doctor gave him some different treatments for vertigo. Then one day, the dizziness got so bad that he collapsed in the shower and he was rushed off to hospital. In the hospital, they did a whole bunch of tests. And they realized that he'd been misdiagnosed. Well, kind of misdiagnosed. He did have vertigo. He was getting dizzy, and that's kind of what vertigo is. But the real problem was that there was an artery to the back of his brain that was closing up, and there wasn't enough blood going to his brain, and therefore he wasn't getting enough oxygen to his brain. And here's the thing. No matter how hard they treated his vertigo, it was never going to work because they had the wrong diagnosis. Well, maybe not the wrong diagnosis, but not the complete kind of diagnosis of his problem. Now, I wonder, when I think about that story, I wonder if a similar thing has happened to us as human beings and to us particularly as Christians, where we have kind of we have a partial diagnosis, but not the whole thing. Like when we think of what's wrong with human beings, what's wrong with you and me, and what's wrong with the world around us, oftentimes we as Christians think about it in terms of our own personal sinfulness. But throughout the scriptures, and particularly here in Titus chapter 3, we're told that our problem is bigger and more fundamental, I guess is a way to put it, than just our own personal sinfulness. And it's not until we get the right diagnosis of our problem that we can truly see our lives begin to change. I don't think it's until we rediscover what our problem really is that we can move beyond or displace the idol of consumerism in our lives and in our churches. So what is our problem? What's the real diagnosis of our problem? Well, according to Paul in chapter 3, here's our problem as humans and the problem of the world. He says this in Titus 3, verse 3. At one time, we too were foolish, disobedient, deceived and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another. Now that is a comprehensive picture of what's wrong. In churches, we're used to looking at those first two descriptions. We're foolish and disobedient. What's wrong with us? We're sinners and we can't help but sin, which is true. But for me, when I read that passage, what seems more fundamental, what seems to be at the heart of all of our problems is not just that we're foolish and disobedient, but rather that we've been deceived and we live as slaves to all kinds of passions and pleasures. Actually, I would go so far as to say it like this. The reason we're foolish and disobedient, the reason that we live in malice and envy and we hate and we're being hated is because we've been deceived. We've believed a lie about the things that have the capacity to satisfy us. And that's what leads to our sinfulness and our brokenness, to envy and malice and all our problems. The reason why we live in malice and envy and we're disobedient is because we are living as slaves to our passions and pleasures. And I think we need to rediscover those two ideas. So that's what we're going to do now, just for a moment. Let's take a look at these two depictions of our problem. We've been deceived and we're living as slaves to our passions and pleasures. So firstly, deceived. Honestly, if I think about what's at the heart of what's wrong with me and what's wrong with all of us, it's this idea that we've believed a lie about the things that have the capacity to satisfy us. We are constantly chasing satisfaction in things that will never be fulfilling. And to me, that should be an uncontroversial thing for a Christian person to say. Because if you flick back right to the beginning of our scriptures, in Genesis chapter 3, what do you see? You see sin and brokenness and evil entering the world as Adam and Eve eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But why do they eat from that tree? Well, my daughter Harper was reading a kid's Bible the other day. You know the heading of the chapter on Genesis chapter 3? It's this: the big lie. Why do they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? It's because they've believed a lie. They've been lied to by the serpent. And what is the lie that the serpent tells them? Well, the lie, I guess in the first instance, is a lie about God. It's saying God cannot be trusted, that he does not want you to become like him. He's holding out on you. He doesn't have your best interest at heart. But if you scratch the surface a little bit, what you'll see is the lie at its core is this. It's saying that you need something more to be satisfied, something different to be fulfilled. You need more knowledge, you need more power, you need more understanding, you need more autonomy. That's what you need. You don't need God and using the good gifts that he has given. You need something else will satisfy you, is the lie of the serpent. Are you following me? All the way through the scriptures, whenever people are looking to something other than God and using the good gifts he has given them in the way that he wants them to, for satisfaction. Whenever you're looking to something else to fulfill you, do you know what they call that? It's idolatry. You're looking to something to save you or to bring you satisfaction other than God and the stuff that he has given you, and using that in the way that he wants you to. Now, how does that relate to consumerism? Well, consumerism, my friends, is a version of that lie. It says you need more things, more stuff, more experiences, more status, more money. And it's only when you chase those things, it's only when you get those things that you will be fulfilled and satisfied. But we know in the depths of our being that that does not work. We will never be satisfied by chasing more stuff. I want you to imagine for a minute a kid. If you could possibly imagine this, I want you to imagine a kid who, from the time they are born, the tiny little baby, they're told that they will be satisfied when they get a really good job that pays them good money, when they have enough money to buy a house, when they can renovate that house, that they won't be satisfied until they have a really good bank balance, that they have money saved away for a rainy day, that they won't be satisfied until they have more stuff, so much stuff that they need to get a storage shed and store it in there because their house is just brimming with all the kind of mod cons and all the luxuries. Now, when that kid grows up and they think that satisfaction is found in stuff, when that kid grows up and they think they'll be satisfied when they get a house and when they can renovate it, when they have money, why would they think that? It's because they've believed a lie about the things that have the capacity to satisfy us. And that lie is permeating our whole culture. It's told to us by our parents, it's modeled to us by our parents and our grandparents, it's told to us by advertising, it's thrust in front of you by celebrities. Everywhere we are told this lie that the thing that satisfies is more stuff, more experiences, more status, and more money. And it's even kind of permeating our churches, wouldn't you agree? I have a Christian friend who came up to me years back and said this. He said, "I'm having a real big problem, Mitch." I said, "Well, mate, what's your problem?" He says, "Well, I've achieved everything I ever wanted to with my life, and I'm still not satisfied, and I've got nothing to look forward to." I was like, "Well, that sounds like a problem." He said, "Yeah, I always wanted to get a uni degree, and I did. I wanted to get this particular job, and I got this particular job, and I'm really good at it. I always wanted to buy a house, and I bought my house. I've nearly paid it off. I always wanted to travel, and I've traveled to most of the places that I've ever wanted to travel to. I wanted a wife and kids, and I have a beautiful wife and 2 kids. I've achieved everything that I ever dreamt of, and I've got nothing to look forward to." Almost sarcastically, I said to him, "Mate, what are you going to do with this huge problem of your success?" He said, "Mitch, I've got a plan. I'm going to go back to uni, get a new uni degree, which is going to lead to a better job, a better paying job. I'm going to buy a new house in a better suburb. I might get myself a new car. I'm going to continue to travel and try to tick off some more places. I'm pretty happy with my wife and kids, so I'm going to keep them for the time being at least." Now, what's the problem with my friend? So he's believed this lie. The lie that satisfaction is found in the accumulation of things and experiences and money. But the Christian story pushes directly against that. It says satisfaction, fulfillment, is not found in the accumulation of things. Satisfaction and fulfillment is only found in God and in discovering how to live in God's world in the way that He wants you to. That's the only place that you can be satisfied. So we've been deceived, my friends, into believing that satisfaction is found in things and in stuff, when the Christian story pushes directly against us. That's what I mean when I say our problem is that we've been deceived or lied to. But our problem, according to Paul, like I said, is greater than that. Not only have we been deceived or lied to, we also live as slaves to our passions and pleasures. And what does that mean? Well, immediately you might think to yourself, oh, Christianity, it's anti-pleasure, it's anti kind of anything fun. Nothing could be further than the truth, my friends. Christianity isn't anti-pleasure. God created pleasure. He wants us to enjoy the beautiful pleasures of this wonderful world that He has created for us to inhabit and for us to take care of. Christianity isn't anti-pleasure. What's Christianity anti? It's anti the misuse of pleasure. Christianity is anti the addiction to pleasure, because it's when our pleasures direct us. It's when our pleasures lead us around that sin and destruction and brokenness are brought into the world. How many lives have been destroyed because of our addiction to the pleasure of sex? How many lives are being destroyed because of our addiction to the pleasure of food? How many lives have been destroyed because of addiction to alcohol or drugs or the accumulation of stuff? Whenever our pleasures direct us, when we are led around by our pleasures, then brokenness and hurt and pain ensue. Are you following me? Thomas Merton puts it like this. I love this line. He says, the evil use of created things is sin. The good use of created things is virtue. Do you get it? I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's whenever we look at the created world around us and we use it only for our own pleasure, only for our own selfish advantage, then that is sin and that is brokenness, and that destroys our capacity to actually live and enjoy the good things that God has given to us. But when we use created things, when we see them as wonderful gifts from God, things that God loves, things that God cherishes, when we rediscover our place in the world to be caretakers of this marvelous created order, now that is virtue, and that is when renewal and restoration happen. So good, right? I think Wendell Berry, he's got a slightly different spin, but I think it's really helpful. He says something along the lines of this, that there are some pleasures in life that come at too great a cost to you and the world around you and the people around you for you to engage in. You with me? He says there are some pleasures that come at too great a cost to you, the world around you, and the people around you for you to continually engage in. Now that's a line, right? And I can think of a whole bunch of different examples of this. You know, there's nothing more pleasurable than eating a massive, fat, juicy steak. I could do that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for the rest of my life. But if I was to engage in that pleasure over and over again, it's not going to be good for me. It's not going to be good for the environment around me. It's going to destroy all of those things. I'll die of a heart attack at 40 years old or something. You can have that same thing when you think about clothes, when you think about like houses, when you think about cars. There are some pleasures that come at too great a cost for us to engage in. That's our problem. Our problem is that we've believed a lie about the things that it can satisfy us. Our problem is that we've become addicts. We're addicted, or we're slaves to our pleasures. And that is where all the sin and brokenness in the world is coming from. So what do we do? Well, I think partly when we see this for what it truly is, it just takes us straight to our knees. So we cry out to God and we say, God, you need to do something because I'm stuck and I can't seem to get out of this. And things need to change because this is destroying everything around me. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next talk. But secondly, Christianity has always had these tools to push against the recurring nature of our deception and our enslavement. Firstly, Christianity tells a whole different story about us, our place in the earth, and what God is doing here. It's telling us a story that says satisfaction isn't found in stuff, the accumulation of things, but rather satisfaction is found in a connection with your Creator. Satisfaction is found in understanding your job or your vocation here on the earth as someone to love and protect and serve the whole created order. Satisfaction is knowing God and living in this world in the way that He has designed you to. It also has tools and mechanisms to educate our passions and pleasures. It tells us the kind of things that we should be passionate about, the kind of things that should enliven us: truth and goodness and beauty and love and generosity and mercy, and opening up ourselves and our lives to the people in the world around us. And it gives us practices to try to limit the power of pleasure in our life. Fasting and prayer and community are the kind of practices that help you limit the place of passions and pleasures in your life. So good, right? I think if we're going to displace the idol of consumerism, we need to rediscover our problem and use all the Christian tools that we have to push beyond the problem.